For those of you who don't know, my name is Mrs. Fiskness. My kids call me Mrs. F because that's so much easier to say than Mrs. Fiskness's physics classes. It's a lot of S's, so Mrs. F is good. What I want to bring to you today is way more information than we actually have time for, so we're going to go quick. I've got about 45 minutes and 43 slides, so buckle up. We're going to go quick. You may not want to write. I'm hearing myself here. If we can adjust that just a little bit in the monitor. We're going to go real quick through this. Some of it's going to go straight over your head. That's okay. Okay? It's supposed to. But the fundamental thing that I want us to really ask is, what's the right question? The theme is, does science and religion marry? Do they coexist? Do they actually merge very well? Or are they complete and utter opposites? Because you're growing up in a culture that's telling you that science and God can't fundamentally go together. And so I want us to start looking at some of the questions. That's what we're going to do. I love questions. Every student in my classroom knows you can ask any question ever that you ever want. I may know the answer, I may not know the answer, and sometimes I get some fantastic questions. And other times I get other questions that I think, did you think before you asked that question? It's okay that you didn't. It just came out. I got asked if you can drink liquid oxygen yesterday. And I was like, that's your choice of how to die, go for it. So we had to talk about that. I have asked questions my entire life. Most people tell me that I ask too many questions, which makes me giggle because you only hear about a fourth of the questions I actually ask in my own head. And you, as students, learn to ask questions, but I want you to realize that at some point in time, though right now your vocation is being a student, that's your job. It may be a job not of your own free will, but your parents and your government want you to have a quality education. Why? Because we want you to grow up and be a quality individual who can give back to your community. Here at Hillcrest, we specifically want you to have a Christian education. Why? Because we don't just want you to know what you know, we want you to know why you know it. And that's where we're going with these questions. You eventually will stop being a student. What I want to propose to you is never stop being a learner. Even this morning, as I was going through this PowerPoint presentation, I was like, oh, I've already asked too many questions in this presentation. We have to move on. So here we go. We're going to start with this guy. This is Nicholas Copernicus. In 1514, he is an astronomer, he is a mathematician, he is mapping the stars, and he realizes that though the fundamental theory at the time was that the earth was stationary and everything revolved around the earth, the math wasn't mathing. He was mapping the stars, he was doing the math. This isn't circular. We can't be stationary. But that was also the leading religious philosophy at the time. Why? Well, because we have Bible verses like in Job, where God asked Job, where were you when the earth's foundation was laid? We have a story of Joshua stopping the sun. Well, certainly if it was stopping, it was moving. We have both David and we have Solomon, who is the wisest in the world, talking about the earth being firmly established. So it was both the religious and the scientific theory of the day that the earth must be stationary and everything else had to revolve around that. And this was the biblical proof. Now you have Nicholas Copernicus who goes, well, when I do the geometry, what they ended up doing is saying, well, it can't be circular. And why is there times in modern astronomy is going to tell you that there are things called epicycles. This isn't going in a circle. How do we add information to explain that it's not circular? So they added epicircles. These are the circles within a circle. So basically our planets are doing the teacup ride around Earth to make the math make sense. And what he does is proposes in his book that actually the Earth is not the center of the solar system. The sun is the center of the solar system. And when he wrote this book, he was so terrified of being excommunicated that he dedicated it to the Pope. And he presented it as a theory because he didn't want to get in trouble for what he knew mathematically was correct. And that's how he died, until Galileo came along, and Galileo said, it's right, I don't care what you say, this is right. And he was put on trial for heresy. And he was then, he was excommunicated from the church. He did not go to jail. He was put on house arrest. And by house arrest, I literally mean like he lived in his own observatory. So, it wasn't exactly house arrest for him. He appreciated being able to study the stars. And I'm telling you this because at this point in time, all of a sudden, we have science looking at the church going, well, maybe your Bible isn't a science text. And we start to see the separation between what faith says and what science says. And we're from this point forward going to see science say, I don't need your Bible, I have my science. That's what your modern science is going to say. And my question to you, is that actually the question? Is the question, science says this and God says this and there's no way they can go together? Is that actually what we're asking? You have people that say, well, your Bible isn't a textbook. No, it's not. It was never meant to be a textbook. It was meant to be the way of wisdom. It was meant to point us to truth. It wasn't meant to be mathematical. It is, but it wasn't designed that way. So are we looking at science and then coupling the Bible to it? Or are we looking at the Bible and then saying, and it explains the science accurately and precisely? Now, one of my favorite mathematicians and logicians, he is towards the end of his career, is John Lennox out of England. And he said the real conflict here is not science versus religion. Because there's those who are Christians and those who are atheists on either side of it. And there's scientists on both sides of the issue. We're going to talk about many of them on both sides of the issue. So let's actually look at the science. Let's break it down. Okay, so fundamentally, your Bible is meant as the giver of knowledge and wisdom. Sometimes I have kids come into my classroom and they're afraid to ask questions because what if it makes my faith look weak? Or what if it makes it look like I'm denying God? And I want to say to you that the very God you serve spoke the universe into existence. There is nothing that can come out of your mouth that will intimidate him. Ask your questions. And there's no better place to ask your questions than right here. Here's where we're going. One of the fundamental atheists of your time is Stephen Hawking. And he said, one can't prove that God doesn't exist. And science makes God unnecessary. I don't need God to explain the laws of physics and science. What he's actually saying is, I'm smarter than your God. And what we have done is in science is created our own version of the Tower of Babel. I'm smart enough. I can get there on my own. Watch me. And what we're doing, what's happening for our Christian young people in particularly, is that you're then going off to college and your faith is being questioned and nobody's told you how to work through it. So that's what we're going to start with today. Your culture is fantastic at creating red herrings. I teach logic here as well as science. A red herring came from the late 1600s in which a hound dog who was being trained to follow a certain scent was then given a secondary scent on the trail, which was the red herring, a particularly smelly fish. And he had to learn how to stay to the right scent. What your culture is going to do is we're going to start down one issue of does faith and science align? And what culture is going to do is then send you off into multiple different areas to get you off scent. So our goal today is to stay on the question, does this align or not? So to do that, let's get through a few basics of science. If you're in my classroom, this is one of the things you have to memorize. What are the laws of nature and physics? They are the orderly and very mathematical system of rules that objects in nature obey, a manifestation of the intelligence in nature that points to the Creator. That God is not only the Creator, that the material that the universe is made of, but the lawgiver of the universe as well. All right, I see some science, some physics kids in here that absolutely deserve A's. Congratulations, you knew it, I saw it. Good job. So let's talk about where does this evidence come from. Let's clarify some terms. A scientific fact is an objective statement that can be proven or disproven. A scientific theory is a representation of how these scientific facts are supposed to relate and rely on each other. It cannot be proven or disproven because it's not all of the things that it is based upon can be proven or disproven, such as the theory of plate tectonics. We know they're there, but we can't tell you why they're there, hence why it stays in the theory category. Once we go past the theory category, we're into the scientific law category. The scientific law category goes beyond scientific fact, it goes beyond scientific theory, and it goes into scientific law. This is mathematical. You cannot deny the math. It is the true across centuries. This does not change. And yet what I'm about to tell you is that we as scientists are willing to break the very laws that we say form the basis of our craft just to prove that your God doesn't exist. Okay, you ready? Here we go. What is the universe? The universe is all matter, energy, space, and time that exist. This is not my definition. This is science's definition. Okay? I want you to keep this definition in your mind. This is what the universe is. According to the this is what we're going to do. We're about to go through your text. You ready? If you have ever gone through a non-Christian textbook, this is your information. We're going to go through it step by step. Okay? What is the universe? Well, our universe is nearly 14 billion years old, so the text says. It is basically 93 billion light years wide. How do we know that? Because, we'll talk about him in a minute, James Maxwell discovered the speed of light to be 300 million meters per second. If I go that across the year, we're talking about 9 trillion kilometers, I had too many zeros there, per year. This is how far one particle of light will travel in 1 year. Hubble tells us that our universe is 879 sextillion kilometers across. Talk about an unfathomable number. Okay, so far, we're all together, right? What needed to happen for science at first was to say, well, it's so expansive and it's so wide and it's always been here. Because remember, if I'm a scientist, I don't need a deity. That means what I see is what it is, and it has to have always been, and it has to be whatever will be. Therefore, originally it was the theory of the universal universe. Always has been, or the eternal universe. Always has been, always will be. That became a problem in 1915 when Einstein created the theory of relativity. The theory of relativity said mathematically the universe is moving forward. I can't move forward if I didn't have a starting place. This is a problem, so much of a problem. This bothered Einstein so much that he chose, he calls it his fudge factor, he chose to add an additional variable, that is that red you see there, to his math. He so wanted the universe to be eternal that he was willing to deny his own mathematical findings to prove that the universe was eternal. This wasn't found out until 1920 when Alexander Friedman redid the math. At the same time in 1920, Hubble also discovered with his telescope that the universe was expanding. Again, if you're moving, something started you moving. We don't have an eternal universe. We have a universe that, by science's own admission, started somewhere. We also know from Hubble that not only was it moving in 1920 when he originally saw it, it's continued to move. It's called expansion. If you've read Frank Turek's book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, they talk about the redshift. What is the redshift? Very quickly, those of you who have done electromagnetic spectrums with me, you know that long waves are what color? Red. Okay? So as Hubble is looking into the universe and it's seeing galaxies, the hundreds and millions of galaxies that we have in our universe, and they're expanding and they're all red. Why are they all red? Because the light that I see right in front of my face, that is a normal wave, has then been stretched as it is moving, and that is why they are all red. We have a stretch of wavelengths. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt, science will not deny this to you, that your universe is expanding. It's moving. Okay? This is how science wants to show it to you. Okay? Now, this is a beginning point, a burst of, in the red there, you have a burst of energy, and then you have a constant expansion from what we had. If I have to have a beginning, what came before the beginning becomes the question, okay? Some people say, well, it's a steady state. There's something before the beginning that keeps feeding the beginning, which is why it all keeps, more of it keeps showing up. And then we had something called the multiverse. Well, our universe is only one of multiple types of universe. Like I have reality and I have reality TV, and then I have virtual reality. It's just another version of reality. That's called the multiverse. Okay. The Big Bang is going to say, no, actually what happened is that there was just one beginning, and everything happened at that beginning and produced everything that you see. So if that's your main theory, that's what we're going to go with, okay? Let's just walk through that. What if it was true? Okay. First law that we're about to break is the law of thermodynamics. It's going to say that energy can be neither created nor destroyed. At this light right here, what they're going to tell you is that particles converged upon themselves and combusted. Okay, well, particles are matter. Matter takes up space, and combustion is energy. So 3 out of the 4 things that the universe was made of was there before it was there? That's what we're going to tell you. We're going to tell you that energy came from nothing but energy. Okay, second law we're going to deny is the second law of thermodynamics. But the second law of thermodynamics is going to tell us that it is in any system, the amount of matter and energy within that system is constantly going to move into less energy and less order. We know this. It is a law of science. We don't deny this is a law until we get here. Because the amount of combustion that had to occur at the beginning in order to produce everything that you see would have eliminated everything that you see at the beginning. There was too much there to produce everything that you see. And not only have we had a beginning and an expansion, in that expansion, what we're going to see, they're going to go against this again, because what starts has to get more intelligent and orderly to get to what we see now, which again goes against the orders of the second law of thermodynamics. We're also going to deny the law of causality. The law of causality was introduced by David Hume. And what he basically said is what you see is the effects. If I see the effects, the cause has to come before that, and the cause can't be the effects. Let me put it to you this way. If the universe is made from matter, energy, space, and time, then it cannot be created from matter, energy, space, and time. But that only leaves you one option. What's out of matter, energy, space, and time? spirit. I had a student once say, well, what came before? If God came before it all, what came before God? Great question. If God is outside of time, he had no beginning. Outside of time is eternity. So we're looking at a God that is outside of this, who then spoke all of this into being. Time, energy, space, and matter, all at one time. But that's not what your book tells you. So how they go around this is with the law of truly large numbers. What does this say? Well, this says given any infinite number of chances, meaning if I roll the universal die as many times as I can, I'm going to find one chance where everything aligns and everything is created. So by numbers, based upon the billions of years we've been alive, there's one possibility, right, that it all aligns, that it all makes sense, that it all comes together and creates the beautiful universe that we see now. Okay, let's talk about that. Let's just keep going with this theory. Okay, it all emerged. Okay, it was from combustion. Okay, time, energy, space, and matter came out of energy, space, and matter. Let's just say it happened. Let's just say they're right. Okay, so I have a universe who then has to make galaxies. We don't have enough time to go into gravitational constants. That's the gravity seeds for those of you who have read Frank Turek's book. What that's basically meaning is that if everything exploded, it then had to morph into smaller galaxies that were gravitationally bound and start creating itself. It would kind of be like if I took an entire box of 1,500 Legos and I threw them up in the air and they fell down and created Yoda. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. We've just exploded it all, but it's going to organize itself and gravitationally bind itself into matter. That makes sense. That's mathematically. All right, we have to have heat sources here because you can't survive in freezing temperatures. So we have to have stars that make heat. Then we have to have, within those galaxies, we have to have solar systems. Within one solar system, we have to have one planet that's within the habitable zone, which means we're the only planet, known planet in the universe that can host complex life. What do I mean by complex life? Anything more complex than bacteria. Okay? All right, we've gone from universe, we're down to earth, we're the only things here, but we didn't start here. We had just, remember, we were just an explosion of stuff. That stuff then has to organize into earth that has to have water because all that stuff's about to come together, and out of that stuff we're going to get life. Ready? That's where we're going. It's called chemical evolution. So what happens is as I have my fundamental elements plus water that have to come together. So I have all of my periodic table of elements that need to come together. Those are going to have to combine into amino acids. Those amino acids are going to have to make proteins because that protein is going to be vital for making RNA and DNA. That then have to replicate themselves with additional proteins that don't exist and close themselves into a membrane and create life. Fred Hoyle once said, "The chance of a higher life form emerging by evolutionary processes is about like a tornado going through a junkyard and creating a 747 Boeing airplane." There just isn't enough roll of the dice. There just isn't enough time to roll the dice that many times. You have to have one roll of the dice that does everything perfectly. Okay, let's just go with it. All right, so we have fundamental elements from the periodic table that are going to converge together and morph into life. Okay. All right. See, did you realize that evolutionary theory is not just you came from monkeys? Did you realize that evolutionary theory means that we have to go from something that is abiotic and inorganic to you? The jumps are farther than Homo sapiens. We came from literal atoms. Atoms become cells. Cells then become, let's keep going. Okay, some of you are still with me. It's fantastic. Cell theory. If you're in 6th grade here, you learn all about cell theory. What are the components of cell theory? All living things have to originate from other living things. It's fundamental to our craft. But we're about to tell you that first living thing was a prokaryotic cell. I want you to look at that nice little tail that this cell has on it. We're going to come back to that. So that first cell that came from atoms that converged into something living, this was the first living thing, okay? It's about 5 micrometers in diameter, but it's about to morph into that second cell. If you've done, we're going to talk about DNA in a minute. If you have done science, you're going to realize that these are 2 totally different types of cells. You cannot jump from one to the other. We have no proof that one has ever jumped from one to the other. But this is what happened. See, that first cell is going to have to become every cell. We're going to go from a bacteria that's then going to produce a type of DNA replication that is going to produce every other type of DNA, both plant and animal. One cell, one bacteria, now is going to have to morph over millions of years from bacteria to you. Okay? It's not a hard leap, right? This same cell is going to have to somehow split into animal cells and plant cells. It's going to carry all DNA for all plants and all DNA for all animals. This first cell, according to your normal science text, occurred 3.5 billion years ago. So that means we've had about 10 billion years so far to go from periodic table to Earth. And now we're going to go from Earth, one cell, through the rest of the evolutionary process, okay? Some people are going to tell you, oh, well, it happened by natural selection. Just the best of the best hung around and bred and produced more. We're going to talk about that for a minute. Some of you are really into coding. DNA becomes a lot like computer coding. So that one cell then took another billion years to become a cell that could split by DNA. Let's talk about DNA for a minute. My coders, you're going to love this. That prokaryotic cell has circular DNA. That means absolutely nothing to you, and that's fine. What it does need to say to you is the amount of DNA that first bacteria can hold is about the same as a photo on your phone. It then has to, by natural selection, produce a cell that's going to hold the same amount of data as a high-def movie. We've increased information, and that goes against the second law of thermodynamics. I can't do that. Mathematically and scientifically, I can't go from a photo to a movie. All code, even our best computer systems currently, all modern code gets boiled down to zeros and ones. It's a binary code. Your DNA is a coordinate code. A, T, C, G. It is a language of coding we don't even have computer systems to understand. But this is the DNA that has to be present in that one cell. Do you see how we have just gone off into a red herring? We told you that life evolved from one cell. What we didn't tell you is that the amount of information that has to be held in that one cell that just was made out of atoms that had no life and has to produce all life that comes from it can't possibly hold the amount of data that is needed to produce it all. Stephen Meyer in his book says, okay, he wrote a book called Darwin's Doubt. He said, okay, and this is a man who was an atheist who through math and science became a Christian. He said, okay, we are trying to stay on this track with you. We're trying to follow you, evolution. We're going to come with you. And then he goes through this timeline of events from single cell to man. And he has a particular, I don't know if you can see it, but F and G right there. Do you see? It's kind of like teal. He said, here's the problem I'm having. I'm trying to stay with you through the number of chances. I'm trying to stay with you through billions of years. But between F and G, I have about at maximum 500 million years from which I've got to go from fish to mammal. And he's going to say, even if the DNA was present, you're telling me, and computer coders, I want you to think about this. When you have a computer code and you have one glitch in that computer code, what happens? What happens to everything else in the program? It crashes. So what he's saying is that in 500 million years, the DNA has to be so exacting, there cannot be a single glitch within that coding, because if there's not a single glitch within that coding, then I can't get from fish to mammal. What he's telling you is that if natural selection says, oh, just the best survive, that's how we got it all. What Stephen Myers is going to tell you is there's not enough time. There's too many glitches. You've just told me I have to do the impossible. Even in your timeline, it's not possible. He goes on to say, not only is it not possible in the timeline, it's not possible in the fossil record. If natural selection were real, if we're going to go through a series of DNA codings and just the best are going to survive, why do I not see the glitches? Why do the glitches not exist in the fossil record? They're not there. Not only are the glitches not in the fossil record, when we look at the fossil record, can you see this? Does anybody see this? All right, I have some of you. Look at it, tell me, what's wrong? What creature is on the bottom of this fossil record? A creature with a spine? A creature with a fully functional nervous system? A creature that can't possibly have existed before sea snails? The science isn't sciencing by their own science. You can't make it work. The chances of DNA by natural selection gradually replicating a DNA strand that can produce everything that you see without mutation, because we don't have mutation in the fossil record, in order to produce you is a mathematical impossibility. Even by their own numbers, we can't make the math work. There's not enough time, there's not enough opportunity, and that cell we started with, you remember I told you to pay attention to that tail that was on it? I want you to look at this tail. single cell makes you want to believe that it was a blob. That cell would be incapable of moving if just one of the mechanisms that tail doesn't do this. It like, have you ever seen on a car lot those guys that wave them in the air and go crazy like this, right? Okay, that's what this tail has to be able to do. Just so that one cell can move, so that it can replicate. We're talking about something called irreducible complexity. Michael Behe in 1998 gave this theory that the biological systems that we have to have in place, we have to have all of it in place. This tail cannot morph over time. There's not enough time. If one part of this tail, if one mechanism mutates falsely, the entire cell is dead. So you're talking about perfection, not natural selection. Richard Dawkins, we're still wanting you to believe this. So the beauty of evolution is that it doesn't provide an explanation for how you get from complexity out of simplicity. It does by gradual degree. At no point are we postulating that there is a sudden existence of complicated beings. Really? You're not postulating that this is complicated? Watch the argument. Ask the questions. Is this simple? And by simple and then mutating, I'm going to get something complicated. If you are a senior here at Hillcrest, you have to go through Frank Turek's, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. Frank Turek was an atheist. Okay, many of the scientists in this presentation started out as atheists, and he said, look, I'm just looking at it from a scientific and mathematical standpoint. And what you're asking me to believe not only denies the laws of physics, and not only is mathematically so complicated that I don't have enough time, even in perfect conditions, to produce what I see, and you're wanting me to believe that as evidence that God doesn't exist. And that's a leap I can't take. I see more creator, designer, I see more intention than I see happenstance. You're asking me to have faith in the impossible and then telling me that my faith in God is improbable. There's more probability that God exists than it does that this isn't complicated. Charles Darwin said himself, I'm not going to be able to read that. I'm getting old. The impossibility of conceiving that, now I'm really getting old. You ready? The impossibility of conceiving that this grand and wondrous universe with our conscious selves arose by chance seems to me to be the chief argument that there is a God. What he's basically saying is I can think about science. I can think about science was, I can think about sciences, and I can think about science will be. And the fact that I can think about that actually is a better argument for God than the science itself. You can think about thinking. No other being ever can think about thinking. It's fantastic. And the fact that you can think about it, even in your atheists are going, I created something pretty fantastic. Look at my evolutionary theory. The fact that I can even think about it being a possibility might be proof that there's something beyond me. So maybe the question is not, does science and religion marry well? Maybe the question is, the science remains the same. The perspective on the science is all that's different. And what the perspective is asking me is, do you believe that there's a God that spoke the universe into existence? Or do you believe that it happened by chance out of chaos through natural selection through billions of years? Look at what the question actually is. Is your God needed or not? Because what science can't tell you, science can tell you about energy, matter, space, and time. Science cannot tell you the why. But why? Why are you here? Why does time, energy, space, and matter exist? Because since the beginning of creation, we have seen His self. He has presented Himself, His divine nature, and His power. He's made it obvious to you that He's there. It's meant to point you beyond time, energy, space, and matter. The why is God Himself. That's what the science is for. I want you to be a scientist. I ask 1,000. I went so far deep into the fossil record this morning. I was like, this is dumb, and I'm getting sidetracked. Ask the questions. Poke holes in the theory. Come into my classroom, ask whatever you want. I probably am not going to know the answer, but I'll find you the answer. Stop accepting what your science book hands you and start asking you, but even if I believed it, does it make sense? And when you come to the end, like we did today, where you're like, scientifically and mathematically, I can't get there. Then you're going to do what Frank Turk did, and you're going to do what Steve Myers did. You go, so when the math stops mathing and the science stops sciencing, what am I left with? Our goal here is to tell you that you're left with a creator. Even Richard Dawkins said, even if I could believe in a God, it wouldn't be a personal God, and He certainly wouldn't care about my sin. But you have a God that does. And that's the point of it all. We did it. We did it in 48 minutes. Yes. All right.